What is up, ladies and gents? This is George Bean, and today I conclude my reviewing the Dark Knight Trilogy with the 2012 Batman film, The Dark Knight Rises, which was the third and final installment in Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, with the entire cast and crew returning for their final outing in the series. This one took a long and difficult process to properly review this. That's why it took me so long to do this one, to try to carefully look into the flaws and all that. But I think I got it now, and I'll try my best on this one. Upon its release on the 20th of July of 2012, the film had achieved mass appraisal from critics, audiences, and fans alike, with many praising it for its action sequences, cast, musical score, and the manner in which it concludes the trilogy, and even named it one of the best films of 2012. And like its predecessor, the film grossed over $1 billion worldwide. In addition, The Dark Knight Rises is also the 5th highest grossing superhero film of all time, the 3rd highest grossing film of 2012, behind Marvel's The Avengers and Skyfall, and is also Chris Nolan's highest grossing film. The plot: it has been 8 years since the Joker's reign of anarchy in the events of The Dark Knight. Bruce Wayne has been forced into retiring from his crime-fighting activities as Batman, left in a frozen state of depression, the lie he and Commissioner Gordon have created in covering up Harvey Dent's crimes that have given Gotham City the momentum it needed to clean up the streets of crime, and thus Gotham City appears to be in its peacetime. But when a mysterious masked man, a mercenary named Bane, emerges, threatening the city to plunge the city back into chaos, Batman is thrusted into resurfacing to combat the emerging threat in an event that will seal his legacy as a legend to the city. As I've mentioned in my review for The Dark Knight, David Goyer had written a treatment script that was for the 2 sequels to be made as a 2-parter. His plan was for the Joker to throw acid at Harvey Dent's face during his court trial, thus turning Dent into Two-Face and making him the main villain for the 3rd film. But Nolan had instead opted to have Dent become Two-Face in the 2nd film, rather than setting it up for the 3rd film in the cliffhanger ending, as he is apparently not a fan of cliffhangers. As we all know, in the end of The Dark Knight, Batman kills Dent in self-defense to save Commissioner Gordon's son. But apparently, this is something I have just learned on the IMDb trivia page, but apparently Chris Nolan has said that if he knew he was going to make another sequel, he wouldn't have had Harvey Dent die in the 2nd film. Whoops! Shows that they did not have any concrete plans in this trilogy. If Nolan had known at the time that he was going to make the 3rd film, he could have had plans, but it's also said that they had plans for the Joker to return for the 3rd film with Heath Ledger returning. But of course, as we all know, Heath died before The Dark Knight had even come out, as a result of overdosing from a combination of drugs in his system. And so this had heavily affected whatever plans they had for the Joker. And so it seems that they tried to get around the Joker's absence in the 3rd film and tried to fill in that big gap that Heath had obviously left behind. Now, again, Nolan was a tad hesitant in returning for a 3rd film, as he wanted a worthwhile story that kept him emotionally invested, fearing that he would become bored halfway through production if he discovered the film to be unnecessary. But through this, he had completed a rough story outline for the film right before he committed himself to making Inception, which was a pretty fucking good film too. When story discussions began for the film, studio executives have wished for the Riddler to be included as the main villain, as he was considered to be similar to the Joker in The Dark Knight, and had encouraged the casting of Leonardo DiCaprio. But Nolan rather wanted the antagonist to be vastly different from previous incarnations, and had ultimately decided to use Bane instead, citing the need for a character with a physical presence in the film. And so when he and his brother Jonathan were writing the script, they had looked to the 1993 comic art Nightfall, which was the comic book debut of Bane, in which he was showcased breaking Batman's back. The 1986 comic series The Dark Knight Returns, which features an older Batman returning after a 10-year absence. And the 1999 story arc No Man's Land, which depicts a Gotham City turned into an isolated gangland. And in addition, they had also took influence from Charles Dickens' 1859 novel A Tale of Two Cities, which centers around a class revolution during the French Revolution. Now, as for me about this movie, I remember having to wait 4 years for this movie since The Dark Knight in 2008. After The Dark Knight had ended, I was pumped for the third film, wondering what it was going to be about, with Gary Oldman saying once that he'd like to see his character Gordon having to hunt down Batman and stuff. And finally, I remember when I had first watched the very first trailer for this film, I was super excited for it. That first trailer had given me loads of goosebumps. It was very haunting in how it sets up what is to come in the film, and how it sets up Bane as this huge threat. I still feel that trailer was done very well. Even to this day, that trailer still gives me goosebumps from its presentation. And yeah, I still remember when I had finally gotten to see it in cinema for the very first time. I remember I had went to my old theater, which I have to say has been closed down since 2013. When I went into the theater room showing this movie, I was actually the only one there that night, so I was all alone in that big room seeing this movie. And when the movie had started, from the very moment it began with the Warner Brothers logo being shown, I was immediately drilled into the movie. My eyes were just glued to the screen. I mean, hell, you could have stabbed me in the gut with a knife, and I'd probably have said, after the movie. That's how much I was into the movie when I first saw it in cinema. So yeah, my very first experience in watching this movie in cinema, I was just glued onto the screen, just watching it. It was like my Return of the Jedi moment seeing it. When seeing it in the cinema, I did not care about the flaws. I did not notice them. And of course, I have watched it loads of times on DVD, and after a while, that was when the cracks started to show. Having it set 8 years after The Dark Knight, I wasn't expecting that at all. I mean, before the movie came out, I was expecting that it would be set 3 or 5 years later, but 8 years? That's a bit of a long time to pass in between movies. I believe the 8 years thing was done to distance the time after The Dark Knight, so we don't have to question the Joker's whereabouts. I believe Heath Ledger's death really affected whatever plans they had for him in the third film. And they had to retool this film to work around Ledger's death. And also, the reason it never explains where the Joker is in the movie, Chris Nolan said he chose to do that out of respect for Heath Ledger. But I remember in the novelization, it does mention what happened to the Joker. Apparently it said that all of the prisoners in Arkham City were transferred to Blackgate Prison, but the Joker was left in Arkham, and that he's the only prisoner in that asylum. That's kind of not so concrete explanation for the Joker's fate in this film. I remember a bunch of people having their own theory of the Joker's fate. They saying that he was executed for his crimes in The Dark Knight, which is fine as well, say he was executed so he wouldn't have to be in this film. But I don't know, they could have at least thoroughly explained what happened to the Joker in this film. But yeah, still, I was emotionally engaged by this film throughout. I loved how it started off with Bane and his gang hijacking that CIA jet by hooking it to their C-130 plane in their effort to kidnap a Russian nuclear physicist. The scene is done very well and looks really real. It is very reminiscent of the James Bond films like Thunderball. I also love the scene when Bane and his goons raid the stock exchange place. And afterwards is the car chase scene where Bane and his gang ride out on motorcycles being chased by the Gotham cops. And then all of a sudden, Batman makes his big re-entrance, chasing after the bikers, all the while he's being chased by the cops. I love that chase scene. It is actually done pretty well. I love how it reintroduces Batman into the film after about 45 minutes of build-up. Christian Bale is still great as Batman. Each time he fights, whenever he throws a punch, he certainly gives it in to them like as if he's actually throwing them. And since this shows an older and injured Batman, I do like the idea. It is to show that he's not superhuman and can't keep doing this forever. He does have physical limits. Those are the kind of movie heroes I go for. Those who are human beings and can bleed. Like John McClane in Die Hard. By the end of that movie, he's badly battered and bloodied. I'm quite surprised that McClane hadn't yet passed out from exhaustion and blood loss. But to say, Bale's bad voice is still shit in this. Especially when he yells, "Where's the trigger? Where is it?" He almost sounded like he was during his on-set rant in Terminator Salvation. "Kick your fucking ass! I want you off the set, you prick! Don't just be sorry!" Da, 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 da. It's so good. I want that as my rant as my ringtone. Now, Anne Hathaway was stellarly casted as Selina Kyle, or Catwoman. I love how she portrayed it with a somewhat cat-like behavior to her, with meticulousness. She plays the femme fatale type perfectly well in this. Seeing her in this, she has come a long way from being in The Princess Diaries. Oh, and during the masked ball scene when she and Bruce are dancing and she warns of a storm coming to Gotham, she leaves, and when he leaves, he can't find his car valet ticket. He asks the valet guy. The guy says, "Your wife said you were taking a cab," and Bruce says, "My wife." And then we cut to Selina speeding down the streets in Bruce's Lamborghini. I love that she stole his car. He's like, "My wife?" It's brilliant. And it's made all the more funnier when Alfred comes to pick Bruce up. I just love Michael Caine as Alfred. It has such a great sense of humor with Bruce. But to say, Anne have discussed the possibility of a Catwoman spin-off and said that she would do it if Nolan was involved. Even though it will likely never happen, but I would actually love to see a spin-off of Catwoman with Anne Hathaway. She was so good in this film. I'd love to see more of her character having to live life as a cat burglar. But of course, hopeful wishes. And next up is Tom Hardy as Bane. I do need to admit, I did like Hardy's Bane. I thought he was much more of a threat than the Bane in Batman and Robin. Here he's shown to be more of a physical and dangerous threat to Batman in Gotham City. I did not even mind the voice either. It sounded good enough to me when I first heard it. But yeah, when Batman and Bane finally fight for the first time, I really loved it. Batman is more older and a bit injured, and he hasn't continued training in the past 8 years. So no surprise he struggles hard with Bane, and Bane manages to hold his own against Batman, handing his ass, having Batman's ass handed to him, till eventually Bane overcomes him and beats him, ending with him breaking Batman's back, like in the Nightfall comics. It's my favorite fight scene in the whole film, to be honest. And to say, after dropping Bruce off in the Lazarus Pit, Bane launches his master plan: besiege Gotham, cut it off from the entire world, holding it hostage with the nuclear bomb, and bait the citizens on a shred of hope for 5 months until the bomb detonates. Now, I do like the idea of Gotham being besieged, cut off from the world. It kind of turns Batman into like Escape from New York in a way, so I do like that touch. But the whole 5 months thing is a bit much. It's understandable why Bane does that. He wants to put the city in a state of hopeless despair, having people trying to cling on to some little shred of hope to keep going, the same way he'd been through when he lived in the Lazarus Pit. But 5 months? That's a long time, and it's also giving Bruce enough time to recuperate and recover from his back injury and try to stop him. But whatever. Plot hole equals plot convenience, timing issues, etc. Now to say, I have never read the book A Tale of the Two Cities, but those who have read the book can see the elements in this film that were influenced by the book. This film focuses on class tension and the stress of capitalism. It shows Gotham City to be in a state of economic recession, causing a wealth gap between the rich and the poor middle class. It shows the underclass people in a sympathetic light, and even Bane proclaims himself as a revolutionary who seeks to help the people take back the city from the wealthy upper class. Now, it is nice to take cues from the book, but it also feels like adding another layer into an already bloated film. But whatevs. Nice little socio-political subtext, doesn't hurt the film a lot. Whatevs. As for the music score, it was composed solely by Hans Zimmer, because James Newton Howard had decided not to return for this film because he felt he would just be the third wheel after Zimmer and Nolan's collaboration on Inception. But even with that fact, Zimmer's score here is pretty good still. It manages to keep you emotionally engaged throughout the film, especially during the second half, starting with Bane besieging the city. One particular theme in it is Bane's theme, which goes for a Moroccan chant that reads Deshe Basara, which translates to Rise Up. I actually really like that chant. It sounds so haunting, and it is very effective in the overall score. And one thing I should mention in this film is that, unfortunately, this movie had also been marked with a horrific incident that happened on its opening night. On the 20th of July 2012, in a cinemaplex in Aurora, Colorado, a mass shooting occurred in an auditorium showing this film during the midnight screening. The shooting had left 12 people dead and 70 others injured. The perpetrator was a man named James Eakin Holmes, who was dressed in tactical clothing, and upon being arrested by the police, he proclaimed himself as the Joker. It was the deadliest shooting in Colorado since the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. The film's cast and crew had went out of their way to send their sincere condolences to the victims and survivors. I remember when the news of the shooting came out, it came with a big shock to me. I was saddened that a shooting happened in a cinema theater, the one place where hundreds of strangers come together to see a movie out of enjoyment. And it is an event I hope will never happen again in a movie theater. Now, with that aside, back to the review. Now, I will say the climax in this film was pretty awesome to watch. It was a warlike battle between the Gotham Police and the League of Shadows to save Gotham City from the nuclear bomb, just when it is close to detonation. It is a very satisfying climax to watch. We get to see Batman and Bane fight again, and it is also done very well. When Bane punches Batman, I can feel the force of the punches he's throwing. But if one little complaint is that we have a final twist. It is here that Marion Cotillard's character, Miranda Tate, reveals herself to be Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter and Bane's lover. He's also her guardian back to when they both lived in the pit. A nice little twist, and the clues to it are done pretty well, but it does not feel justified in the overall movie. It honestly feels forced in, adding another layer to an already bloated plot, and it's mostly just because Chris Nolan had wanted to work with Marion after Inception, so he decided to write this character in as a way to work with her again. Now, while of course I do love the climaxes in this film and Batman Begins, I'd honestly say that the climax in The Dark Knight is possibly my number one out of the bunch, because in Begins, the final battle involves having to save Gotham from a deadly fear toxin that is being unleashed on the populace, whilst in this film, the final battle involves having to save Gotham from being obliterated by a thermonuclear bomb. But in The Dark Knight, the battle involves having to save Gotham from falling into anarchic turmoil, and in it, the Joker calls it the battle for Gotham's soul, meaning that he's intent on crushing the city's hopes and morality. And his plan was to corrupt its White Knight, heroic District Attorney Harvey Dent, into a vigilante serial killer. He knew that such a revelation would leave the city's populace in a state of desolation, and all their hopes in Dent would be crushed. But Batman decides to avert that by covering up Dent's crime spree, taking the blame on himself, pinning Dent's murders to himself, lying to the public that Dent had died a heroic martyr, thus ensuring that his prosecutions and the city's hopes are intact. So the battle for Gotham's soul was fought not in a fist fight, but by wits, psychology, and decision making. So yeah, The Dark Knight's climax is my most favorite out of the climaxes in the entire trilogy. But still, the climax in this film is still okay and enjoyable to watch, especially when it leads into a big car chase when Batman uses the new Batwing, along with Catwoman on the Batpod, to stop the truck carrying the nuclear bomb. It is a pretty awesome chase to watch, very action-packed. But when they find they are unable to stop the bomb, Batman decides to sacrifice himself to carry the bomb out of the city, out to the ocean in the Batwing, and it detonates. It was a very well done scene. Believing that Batman that died, I was like, and the tying loose ends ending is well done. After such a big climax, you kind of begin to calm down and watch as everything comes to a final close to this trilogy. Now, of course, we are also revealed that Bruce Wayne hadn't died from the bomb, but is in fact hiding in France with Selina, while a bit of a cheat to his sacrifice. But it at least shows that Bruce can now finally have the normal, happy life he was unable to have as Batman. And it also ties into how Batman is to be depicted as a legend to the city, so that's done well, despite its flaws. But yeah, the way the film ends, I became quite a bit saddened, because I knew that this was going to be the last time we will be seeing these characters in the series before it is rebooted, to the point where I actually wanted it to keep on going and never end. It's truly a shame that this would be the very last time we see these actors in these roles. But as the saying goes, sometimes a trilogy is best left told alone, and not to go too far before it gets ridiculous. Now, of course, after this film, it didn't take long for Warner Brothers to reboot Batman, i.e. 4 years, reintroducing the character in their new DCEU film, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, with Ben Affleck in the role, who would continue to play the role in the eventual Justice League film. And even then, there have been long discussions of an inevitable standalone reboot of Batman, which was said to have Affleck again playing the role. But by now, according to YouTube channel Midnight's Edge, it seems very likely that Affleck is already thinking about jumping ship after the negative receptions the DCEU has been receiving, with murmurs of Jake Gyllenhaal being considered as a replacement. And the reboot is slated to be directed by Matt Reeves, who directed War for the Planet of the Apes, which I fucking loved, as stated in my review. As I should say, the Batman reboot, directed by Matt Reeves, I am excited for it because Matt Reeves is directing it. I honestly hope he does stay on to direct it. So, overall, I give The Dark Knight Rises a rating of at least 7.5 stars out of 10. Because while it is the weak entry in the trilogy, it is still a very stellarly done trilogy ender that depicts Batman's resurfacing and having to save Gotham from total destruction to prove that he is the hero Gotham needs, as stated in the previous films. The story, while heavily flawed, is stellarly done to keep you engaged into the story, helped by the performances, especially by Bale, Hardy, Oldman, and Hathaway. I do happen to agree with how Roger Ebert described this film. It begins slowly with a murky plot and too many new characters, but it builds to a sensational climax. So yeah, if you are a huge fan of the Nolan Batman movies, this one is worth the watch. So thank you for watching, ladies and gents. And what did you think of The Dark Knight Rises? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Love it? Hate it? Let me know what you think of it in the comments. And I do intend on giving you all as many reviews as I can. It's not like I don't like doing this. It's mostly just like coming in and delaying my reviews. Just life coming in and delaying my reviews. Especially when having to take care of a mother in very ill health. But I promise you, I will keep doing this no matter what. So I do sincerely ask for patience from y'all. Nothing more. As a teaser, I do want to review the Captain America movies very soon, so possibly expect that to come soon. So thanks for watching, ladies and gents, and until then, I will see you all next time, and remember, I'm Batman. Peace!